Greetings and salutations, guys. Eric here with my review of Star Wars Skeleton Crew Episode 3. This is a full spoiler review, so here is your official spoiler warning. All right, you are warned. I really am digging this show, and I'm still enjoying this with the third episode. You know, the whole sort of pirate / scoundrel criminal side of Star Wars is a really fun one to dive into, and I feel like the attempts in live action in the past haven't always worked out so great. I mean, Book of Boba Fett should have been a great place to do that, but that show was kind of a big mess. And Solo, I mean, I enjoy a lot of Solo when it is being just kind of a fun criminal heist movie. It's just that it also gets bogged down by all the Han Solo origin story parts that kind of stick out like a sore thumb, where they are giving you information you don't need about Han Solo's history. So this show, I feel like, is so far delivering what I've wanted the most out of this kind of pirate adventure Star Wars story. Of course, it's got these kids involved, which wouldn't be something I would have thought of, but it's working, you know, them going along on this adventure, this Goonies type, scenario that they're in. It just works. It clicks. And now we've got Jude Law's character. We'll talk about his different names. But he's, there as kind of a guide for them into this world. He can bring them around to these different nefarious types. And I'm quite enjoying that dynamic. But yeah, let's talk about Jude Law's character, who is revealed to be Silvo here, the guy from the beginning of the first episode, who was the captain initially until there was a mutiny. Now, of course, that's who he is. This is not a huge shock, but I don't think it's meant to be at all. It's not really presented as a shocking twist. They're giving it to you pretty casually. I think they know that you're going to be ahead of the game on this one. Why was that scene even there, unless this was an important character? Also, by the way, I kind of figured it had to be Jude Law from the end of the first episode, because Jude Law's name was in the closing credits, and the way these Disney Plus series work with both the Marvel and Star Wars shows is they don't list a cast member unless they were in the episode. Hence, Jude Law had to be somewhere in that episode, even if he was under a mask and his voice was distorted. So, okay, so he's Silvo. He is the captain who is now, on the outs very much, and now on the run. But yeah, there's a lot of interesting elements to this character, especially the whole, is he a Jedi of it all? I like that the kids themselves are having the discussions that we've been having since we saw the trailer, and we saw Wim declare, "You're a Jedi." And a lot of people are saying, "No, he's not. I bet he's a fake." Well, these kids are having this argument. They are having this discussion amongst themselves. And Wim obviously is a believer. He wants this to be true. And then you've got Fern and, KB, who are both like, I'm not buying this. This is probably not true. And I think that the, answer is going to be somewhere in the middle, because he certainly keeps seeming to use the Force to the extent that I think it's going to be a cheat if he doesn't have any Force powers. I don't see how this can all be trickery. I mean, there's always some way, but it feels like he has to have the Force, right? But probably never trained as a Jedi. And I always think that that's a cool thing to throw into Star Wars, especially because we usually have either they're untrained and they didn't even know they had the abilities, or they barely knew. He seems like a little more sort of self-aware about it all. He probably always knew he had these powers. He had this modicum of ability he can do with them, but not that much. Although he's doing enough that maybe he got a little training. And I guess there's always the, someone who survived the attack Order 66 of it all. And we'll see if they go down that route, or it's he was just someone who was never a part of the system at all. But I really like the dynamic with him and the kids. I really like that he is this scoundrel type, in it for himself, trying to make a deal with them. Basically the power play at the end of the episode about, okay, he'll work for them, hoping for a reward. Of course, we know we shouldn't trust him. But this is a world of characters you shouldn't trust. And, that's the thing that these kids have been thrust into. And we saw them go visit Kim, his friend here, the owl woman. That was a cool, interesting, different type of creature for Star Wars that I very much enjoyed. And then, of course, there was already backstabbing occurring, because that's the element of it all. And we'll see. I have not seen past this episode. This was the only one beyond the first two that they sent us as media. So I have no idea what happens next. It seems like we're going to do a sort of planet to planet, getting closer, trying to get back to At Attin. And, they're going to kind of gain more information and try to get their way there. And that's fine. I think that works for a series like this, because we're also, I think, along the way, hopefully going to be learning more about At Attin and what the hell is going on with this planet, because there's so many interesting questions around it. And I got to tell you, I didn't mention this only because I didn't want to even sort of get too ahead of myself, because I already seen episode 3. But when I was talking about the first two episodes, initially, before we know almost anything, I did start to wonder, is this like a imperial planet? Are these basically like Hitler Youth, but they're Empire kids, but they're not outwardly evil. They've just been raised in the Empire system. That's not what it is, obviously, because they don't even know the Empire ever happened. But the more we learn about this planet and the fact that they were so isolated by choice and that there was no outside contact allowed, it's like, what the hell was going on here? Why was this all a planet that was kept this secret? I am very intrigued by the answers to that question. And yeah, just learning more about these kids and what is their knowledge level of the Star Wars galaxy. Like, they know about Coruscant and they know about Alderaan, except they don't know that Alderaan blew up. To them, it's just a vibrant, important part of the galaxy, not a X part of the galaxy. So yeah, where does it all cut off? Again, we don't know exactly how long this planet has been isolated or why, but I continue to want to know the answers, and that is a mark of a good show if it's making me ask that. We got some more familiar Star Wars iconography here by the appearance of X-Wings, and that was a cool chase element there. I'm glad that the kids did not murder New Republic X-Wing pilots, but they are getting to get in the mix of it in sort of these action-adventure scenes and have, as we've already seen in The Mandalorian, that basically X-Wing pilots at this point are kind of the cops of the galaxy. So it makes sense to mix them in here. I think it's a strength of this show that to this point, they are keeping these characters extremely isolated from anyone familiar we know. And they're not mixing it up with characters from the other series. Even if that happens down the line, I want them to get their own adventure here, their own story, and have them firmly established before any sort of crossover happens. And I'm glad that they are still doing that. And yeah, it's fine to put in something like an X-Wing fighter, but we don't need it to be like a bunch of pilots we already know. Also, by the way, when it comes to connecting to the larger Star Wars galaxy, love the battle droid showing up. Very funny moment about his not understanding how that war turned out. So yeah, so far so good with Star Wars Skeleton Crew. Very much enjoying this show. I should mention David Lowery, who directed episode 2. I forgot to mention that last week, but also this third episode. I mean, he has a very eclectic, fascinating background as a director, directing films like The Green Knight, but also Pete's Dragon, which are both excellent in very different ways. And I thought he got to really blend elements here. And also, he'd already shown he has a real knack for working with kids. Pete's Dragon, if you haven't seen it, by the way, is one of the best of the Disney remaking their old movies. It just, I think, was one of the least seen of all of them. So check it out if you haven't. But yeah, he worked really well in the Star Wars realm. This was his second and final episode of Skeleton Crew, but we've got quite a great list of directors for this entire series, and I'm looking forward to seeing them all sort of get to do their own thing with each installment. And then I also didn't mention last week Mick Giacchino, who does the score here. He is coming off The Penguin, where he did a really strong score, and talk about a chip off the old block, because, this is Michael Giacchino's son, and he is quickly proving to be a very talented composer in his own right, and I'm really digging his score for Skeleton Crew, especially the closing credit, the main theme, which evokes, as you might think on this show, a kind of pirate shanty, and I think that's really cool how it takes kind of a Star Wars sound. It feels like recognizable Star Wars music, but not doing the John Williams famous theme, and mixing in with this kind of pirate vibe to it, because this series, of course, is so immersed in pirate imagery and characters. So yeah, lots of cool elements blending together here. And one more thing I wanted to mention about last week was I was completely wrong, because I was so sure that they had taken actual footage from the Star Wars Holiday Special and digitized it and done modern effects on it to make it look like that new hologram that we saw Neil's siblings watching. They didn't. They recreated it. That John Watts, they've done some interviews about it, and he's talked about how they wanted to do what I assume they did, but they couldn't. The footage wasn't usable. The footage did not work for their purposes, so they had to reshoot it all, recreate it, have Mick Giacchino rescore it, because they couldn't even use the music. And man, kudos to them. I have never been so happy to be wrong, only because I'm so impressed that the recreation I thought was pretty dead on. I mean, I watched those clips, I don't know, maybe 15 minutes apart after I saw it on the episode, and I went on YouTube to watch the original clip, and I was very convinced, oh wow, they took the original footage. Nope, different actors, decades apart, but excellent recreation. and a deep, deep cut, but a very appreciated one. All right, guys, those are my thoughts on episode 3 of Skeleton Crew. Let me know in the comments what you're feeling about this show so far. If you can like and subscribe, that would be excellent. I'll see you next time. Take care.